Today's January 31st, 2024. My name is Greg Sperling and I'm a volunteer at the Stratford Veterans Museum located at 5952 Main Street in Stratford, Connecticut. I'm joined here today by former U.S. Navy Seaman First Class Ross Grahn, who was born on February 1st, 1925 in Ontario, Canada, and served in the U.S. Navy from February 1944 to May of 1946. Welcome. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
So,
my pleasure.
We talked. I just mentioned that you were born in Ontario, Canada. So tell us your route from Canada to here.
From Canada.
Here you go.
My parents were American citizens, and I was born in Canada, February 1st, 1925. Grew up in Canada. 18 and a half years. After 18 and a half years, I tried joining the Canadian Navy. Put my application in and waited, and waited, and waited. First thing you know, I got a draft notice. Report in 10 days. I'm not reporting. I took that draft notice, and my mother, who was with me at the time, my father and my sister had already come to the United States, and my mother was less there. My mother's was 100% English. She didn't even like the United States. But I decided I better take her or she's going to be abandoned there. So I told my mother, pack our suitcases, and we came to the United States. Arrived in Bridgeport, December 7th, 1943. Pearl Harbor Day. Told my mother to wait on the corner. I'm going around to the post office to join the Navy. Went in and saw a recruiter in there and told him who I was. He asked me the questions and how old I was and everything. He listened patiently. I told him I'm ready to go. I want to go right away. There's a war going on. Do you realize that? He says, yes, I do. That's where I want to go, and I'm ready to go now. I'm sorry. I cannot accept you. You cannot join the Navy through me. You're already over 18 and a half. If you're over 18 and a half, you have to go through selective service. I said, what are you, nuts? I'm here, I'm ready to go. What's 2 months got to do with it? Change the date on there and let me get going. He wouldn't let me do that. I had to wait 2.5 months to go through selective service. And they sent me to boot camp, Sampson, New York. It's winter time, March. We're there for 5 weeks. The ground is frozen over. There's nothing to do or to train you. There's lakes frozen over. You can't row boats. You can't do anything. So for those 5 weeks, we marched to the mess hall and back 3 times a day. That was my military training. Instead of getting 3 weeks leave, I went home, had 1 week leave. My mother says they're going to be sending you away. President Roosevelt says nobody goes away without being properly trained. That's a lie. Been 1 week of leave with my mother. Went back to boot camp, stayed overnight and turned around, then shipped out back down to Brooklyn Navy Yard. Stayed in Brooklyn Navy Yard for about a week. The following week went to Pier 92. Spent about 4 or 5 days in Pier 92. Got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, take your sea bag with you. Went down to Pier 90. The Queen Mary is waiting for us. A lot of my friends were in that. They all come from the Bronx, Brooklyn, New York, they drop their sea bags and they run. I have a friend that's in front of me that says, I got to hang around with Ned. He said, should we drop our sea bags? You drop yours if you want. I said, there's a war going on. I'm going to go and fight in the war. Got on the Queen Mary, sailed overseas. Ended up in Scotland. Near Gorak was a little town in the, I even forget the name of the city. But we stayed there for, I'd say maybe roughly 6 weeks before we ended up getting on a train and went down as far as I can't remember. It was a prison. Went not so far. Anyway, we got so far down. We stayed maybe for about 2 weeks there, and from those 2 weeks, then we shipped on down into the lower part. Ended up on LSTs. Ended up on LST 382. That ship had been through, I think, 3 invasions. I think North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. They're all veterans. They know what it is. They've been bombed, they've been shot at and everything, and they're just good regular guys. And when you get on the ship, because there's 30 of us, I said to myself, there must be going to be expecting an awful lot of dead people to put 30 extra men on every ship. We're cannon fodder. Basically, that's what it was. Thankfully, we had General Eisenhower over there at that time. I think he's about the most brilliant man you could ever imagine. To make the arrangements for like 5 different nations landing on the beaches of Normandy, which are so well protected and everything else. I think there were 6,000 ships proceeded from where we proceeded over. It's almost dawn when we're out there. We're not landing yet. We can't land first because we've got Patton's tanks on the ship. And you have to get infantry in there first to clear the way for the tanks to land on it. So we don't arrive on the beach until maybe 9 o'clock in the morning. And besides over there's tides that are 35-foot tides. And it's hard to manage when you're going to land and when you're not going to land. And when you do land, you're going to be stuck on that beach for roughly 12 hours before you can back off again. Anyway, there was artillery coming every so often, but you could see what was going on. And to me, standing and watching as dawn is breaking, the paratroopers are coming over and they're jumping off and they're jumping into flak. You could see that half of them are dead before they even hit the ground. And there's a minesweeper. I'm standing on the deck, I'm watching. Here's a minesweeper, a British minesweeper coming alongside. I'm saying to myself, the minesweeper should have already been here. Here's the minesweeper coming in to sweep the mines when we're already moving along. As I'm standing and watching, it exploded. It hit a mine itself. And it went down like a stone. I could see a guy in the wheelhouse, big tall guy. He runs down the thing to the deck, the main deck. He runs across the main deck, and I'm saying, where the hell is he going? It's going down so fast, he's splashing through the water. He's running for the mast. He gets hold of the mast and he starts going up the mast. As fast as he went up the mast, the water's coming behind him. And I'm saying, what the hell's he gonna do when there's no more mast? 3 feet were left. The ship hit the bottom. And he's on the top of that, he's on the top of the mast. I just, what a thing. I understand there's probably people that say to me there's maybe a crew of about 60. I don't really think there's 60 people on a minesweeper. There may be 30, but out of that, There's this guy on the mast up there, and there's 4 or 5 guys laying down on the beach. That's when our executive officer, who was a good strong guy and everything else, comes running out and he says, boat crew. And that's what I had been trained in, to run a LCVP, landing ship tank personnel. LCV, the one that drops the ramp,
Yes.
it's on the beach. And he says, boat crew, and oh Christ, that's me, and I run and I jump in the boat, and we go out there. Takes off his shirt, his jacket, and everything else, and dives in that water. That's the English Channel. And that water's cold. It's about 40 degrees. It's freezing cold. And he's pulling guys and hollering to me, come on, come on. I get over there, and we pull 5 guys on into our boat and get them back onto the ship. Well, there's only 2 guys that survive it. Because of the concussion, when that ship goes down, it ruptures their internals, and they died. But there was one Englishman on there. When he spoke, you can understand him. He came from Lancashire or whatever the hell it was, and they've got accents over there. They're so goddamn British. They're so English you can't understand them. Anyway, that was my first ordeal with that thing.
Now, what was your military occupational specialty? What was your main job on the LSD?
My main job was just being a seaman.
Okay.
Yeah. You automatically became a seaman when you stepped on the ship, really.
Yeah.
Seaman second class. So I become a seaman first.
Okay.
And when you get on the ship, because there's 30 extra, they ask you, what would you like to do? And at the time when I'm looking, it was a nice sunny day, and here's a gunner's mate over there, cleaning a 20 millimeter, standing there with his shirt off and nice and sunny, and says, I'll be a gunner's mate. Okay, we'll get back to you. Meanwhile, they give you jobs chipping a deck and keeping you busy, keeping you work. You got to do something, so I'm chipping paint. When they gave me my choice to be something, that's what I said. I want to be a gunner's mate. And 2 weeks went by, and I'm standing a watch. It's like what was it? 4 to 6 in the morning. And it so happened the officer at the time was the gunnery officer, and we happened to meet. And so on. He says, "Grahn, I thought you wanted to be a gunner's mate." I said, "I've been waiting. You said you'll get back to me. You never got back to me." He said, "Well, Mr. Grahn, who's the deck officer, he's the one in charge of me because I'm just a seaman." And he says, "Mr. Grahn says that you didn't want to be that." I said, "He's a effing liar." It's in those words. He's an effing liar. You're not supposed to say that. I know that, but I'm teed off because somebody's saying something that's not true.
Yeah.
And he was flabbergasted because when I said that, he's standing behind me, and he's stumbling over his words. He says, "I meant to tell you, I didn't get to tell you yet. I want him to be a boat coxswain." Because meanwhile, some of the things that I was doing was chipping the paint and so on, and they needed a bow hookman on an LSCVP. And they said, "Go down there and be with that coxswain, and you be the bow hookman for now." And while I was doing that, I'm walking along the gunnel of the thing one time, and I slipped and I fell into the water, in freezing cold water. Anyway, I just swam around to the stern of the boat, and I hauled my ass up, and I got back up in the boat, and I'm soaking wet, but I continued doing my job. Somebody must have been watching, because say, this guy, no matter what, he's still doing his job. And that's when they ended up telling me, he says, "I don't want to be a gunner's mate, I'm going to let him be a boat coxswain." That tickled me pink, Because if I'm in charge of that boat, I take care of that boat. That's up to me.
Yeah.
I'm the captain of that boat. And I get a bow hookman guy that came from Pennsylvania that I got along good with him, and he becomes my bow hookman. Between the two of us, we run that boat. I don't know where to go from there.
Well, that's after Normandy. Where did you guys go?
Well, that's when we were in I forget the name of the port we were in. It was quite a ways down, so we're not in the first of the bunch going over there.
Right.
But it's dark when you leave. We leave like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and slowly move here. It's to confuse the enemy of what's going on, because they got planes flying over that are watching what we're doing all the time.
Right.
And this ship goes that way and this one goes that way. And we move on this ship. And they told me to take this, go over to this boat over here. It's whoever's forming up this flotilla to get the orders of where we're going to be in the line and so on. And they sent me over to get this flotilla, and I come back with it. And I say, well, this is to myself. I'm saying to myself, this is going to be the real thing, because it's important what we're doing,
Right.
and that's what happens. And we line up, and away we go. I think there was something like 3,000 ships. General Eisenhower had to arrange this whole thing.
Now,
He became our president,
Yeah.
naturally, you know.
Yeah.
But it's afterwards I say, this guy had to be really friggin' to arrange for the Canadians, the British, and all these 5 different landing zones and beaches. Omaha Beach was the most dangerous one of all.
Right.
The one that most lives were lost on. Canadians and the British and so on, that they had maybe a couple of hundred that got killed and so on. But we had thousands. And you could see, because we're moving in, and you can see what's going on over there when dawn breaks, and you can see what's happening. There was a break in the weather. That was the key thing, a break in the weather that the Germans don't know about, because they don't have the weather reports like we do, and we know what it is. And in this break of the weather, it's supposed to be like 1 hour or whatever it is. The thing with it is, you get a break in the weather, but the swells are still coming in. That's what probably wasn't calculated, because when those swells come in and those boats land on that beach, Omaha Beach in particular, which is protected by guns up above, guns below, on the beach itself, there's, what do you call them? Cement pillboxes. Pillboxes that are zeroed down on the beach. Anything crossing the beach, that you're dead, and that's how it worked. But the boats couldn't even, when the boats would go in to try to land on this beach with 35-foot tides, then you got to pick it out at the right time when the tide is high and the swells are going. And when the boats get on the beach, you got to be a really goddamn good boatswain mate to be able to back off of a beach that's got these waves come. Once you land in there, you got to back off. You can't. They broach, and all the boats are all broached on it, and the guys running the boats and this enemy, the soldiers that we got on there, they run into the water. The water's freezing close. If they get wounded or something like that, in no time, the tides, everything's.
Take them out.
It was a disaster.
Now, how long were you on the LST 382?
LST 382. Let's see. I was on that thing for roughly 10 months.
Okay.
Because after the invasion, we went back and forth and supplying troops and bringing more troops, back and forth, back and forth. It was like a 5-day round trip back.
Okay. And I see that at some point you moved over to LST 290.
That was after coming back home.
Okay. All right, so you were
When I came back home and the whole crew was on there, and I'm running this boat all this time, I'm doing all the things that I'm doing. The the officer that I had didn't put anything in the records of what I had been doing. I'm just an ordinary seaman as far as the thing goes. We ended up back here by Christmas. We got home by Christmas on a French ship. Our ship gets turned over to the British.
Okay.
It's given to the English or whatever it was because there's no sense.
And when did you get home? Christmas of what year?
That would be 1944.
44. Okay.
Yeah. 1944, we're back by Christmas. I'll be home for Christmas, which was almost unbelievable. Because I had a Canadian accent. The guys on the ship that I am, they're coming from Brooklyn and they're coming from North Carolina. They're coming from all over. I'm the only one with Canadian, which is a British accent. And they say, well, what the hell would you want to go home for? He says, you're a limey, you're here. I didn't dare tell him my mother was 100% English, but my father was 100% Swede. Oh, I get a razzing all the time over that thing.
I'm sure.
Anyway, we come home, we have a 30-day leave. After the 30-day leave, they put us on a thing and they send us down to Florida. And when we get down in Florida, I forget where, it was Fort Pierce, Florida. That's where Fort Pierce, Florida. Indian River down there. And when we get down there, we're going to form up and we're going to go get another LST and we're going to go to Japan. The only thing was, I was the only one out of the whole crew that could not go.
Why is that?
It wasn't in my records that I had done this or had done that. I have to stay there and I have to go to boat school. I'm already a veteran. I know how to run a boat.
Yeah.
Cold weather, 35-foot waves and everything else. And I got to go to this boat school. Everybody on that ship is telling me he knows how to run a boat. Let him stay with us. Let him stay. You feel like one of the family.
Yes, of course.
It's very disappointing. If I had let me do what I wanted to do, I would have stayed in the Navy. But because of what they did, I said, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Anyway, I had to go through boat school. And when I go to boat school, they've got 5 officers down there that are telling people how to run the boats. You do this, you do that, and you do this. It's Florida. There's a 1-foot tide in Florida. Big difference between a 35-foot tide. Plus, if you fall in the water in Florida, the water's warm. It's not 40 degrees. So they're telling people how to do this and how to do that. I just couldn't take it. I said, I excuse myself, and I would like to speak to you 5 officers, because I've been in combat. And this is not the way you teach people to run a boat. You can't do this, you can't do that, and so on. You got to slam it in gear, and you got to move, and you got to go, and you got to switch around, you got to do things fast. You have to do this. They wouldn't listen to me. Anyway, I still have a boat, and I have a couple of boots, a couple of guys that don't know anything, a couple of guys are friends of mine, and I tell them, one of them's got to be the signalman. He knows how to send the signal to the beach, and the other one knows how to do something else. And would give us an ensign who's a year younger than me, gold braid and ensign, who he might as well be a boot. Actually, he was just a beginner.
Right.
He's a year younger than me. And when he first gets on the boat, I said to him, "Sir, we're going to go out there. We're going to be in the waters, and it's going to splash. Your gold braid is going to get wet, and when your gold braid gets wet in salt water, it's going to turn green." He says, I can't take my uniform off. It's illegal for me. I said, well, soon as we get out of sight from these guys, I says, wrap it up and stick it underneath the bow, and because it's going to get ruined. I can't do that. Okay, then he kept his uniform on, and it got wet, and his gold braid turned green. But we went out into the Florida waters and did our thing, and they see practice landing on the beach, and they see that I go on the beach and I get off the beach, and I know how to run a boat. Everybody's supposed to do this so slow and everything. You don't do things in combat. You don't do things slow.
No.
You don't do nothing slow when you get in a war zone. Anyway, because of what we did and how I got off the beach and so on, they decided to they made us a rescue boat. Those boats that got on the beach and didn't know how to get off in their boats, and we would go in there and throw them a line and tow them around to get them off. And they give us a different type of, they give us like a personnel boat. Doesn't have the big steel ramp on the front of it and everything. It's just a low boat, and it's only got it's just for troops.
Right.
They can run off that thing fast and so on, and that's the boat. And that goes much faster than a LCVP because you don't have this heavy front end on it. Which was, everybody liked me because I knew how to do things, and worked out pretty good.
Good.
But because of that and not being able to go with the crew and what it was, and I've already went through another boat training thing, it's a matter of, I want to go and help win the war.
Right.
No, we got sent up to Virginia, stayed in the camp up there, I guess, for about 8 weeks, practically doing nothing. Go to the mess hall and back, and just like hanging around. I go, what a waste of time. That's when we end up getting up to Chesapeake Bay, and they come up with another LST. That's where 290 comes in.
I gotcha.
We get on 290, and they go out of the Chesapeake Bay, out the thing, and everybody's saying, which way are we going to go? If we're going to go south, we're going to be going down to somewhere. But we didn't. We're going north. We end up in Hoboken, New York, in the shipyard. They're going to convert this thing to refit it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in that thing when the war was over.
Okay.
We never got to go anywhere on the LST 290.
What was ship life like when you were on your LSTs? What were the accommodations like?
Oh, bunks.
Bunks?
They had bunks, yeah.
Right.
They didn't have hammocks on the LSTs.
Okay.
They're flat bottom boats. And the boats that have got a keel, they do more of this.
Right.
Flat bottom one that just bounces up and down like a bathtub.
Okay.
It does a lot of rolling and so on, but when you're in that bunk and that ship is rolling, you just hold your hand on here and you stay in it.
And what did you do with your downtime on the ship, if there was any downtime?
Well, you end up having to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things I volunteered for was because you clean the head. It sounds like a lousy thing to do, but if you're cleaning the head, you don't have to stand and muster and do all those things. You got a job to do, and you go and do it. And cleaning the head, clean the sinks, swab the deck down there, and so on, so you don't have to muster. That's.
And I see in your records there is another ship. Let me look at it. It's the USS General A.F. Anderson?
A.E. Anderson.
A.E. Anderson, okay.
General Anderson. It's a troop ship.
All right.
It's a big ship. Well, big according to those times.
Right.
We could bring 5,000 troops on that ship. This when the war is over,
Mm-hmm.
actually. and went back and forth to Europe,
Oh, okay.
bringing home. One time we brought home German women who had married Americans. They're coming to America. A lot of those German women that are married to blacks. You know, I used to say to myself, what a surprise they're in for.
And how many trips did you think you made back over to Europe and back when you were on that ship?
Oh, I'd say maybe about 7, maybe about 7 things.
And you were
We went to we went to Le Havre. Previous to that, I forget where the hell we went, but it was over in that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your most memorable moment of your military service?
Most memorable one was the landing at Utah Beach. Like I say, we were tanks, and we were not the first ones going in there, but as we were moving in, I'm telling you, watching the minesweeper come, that was the most memorable moment I could imagine. Watching a minesweeper coming along, and the minesweeper itself, it's mine. I mean, it happened to be a nice sunny day, beautiful day, really. And the water wasn't rough at all; it was kind of calm. Some of the most memorable ones was going there after the invasion, when our troops start coming back. And one of the times when we were over there, and we're watching these troops coming down, that was mostly airborne. That were, it's 101st and 82nd Airborne. 101st Airborne was the one that landed around the Utah Beach area, and the 82nd landed the Omaha Beach area. I mean, yeah, Omaha Beach. That was where the most fighting of all went on at Omaha Beach. You could see they had the Rangers go in there. 280 Rangers came in to climb that cliff. By the time they got to the top and got that cleared up there was only 80 left. Over 200 lost their lives just trying to climb that cliff. You could see it.
I'm sure.
It's not nice to see.
No.
And the pillboxes on the beach were zeroed in. Once they could get on the beach with this big wave splashing against you in the high tides, you want to get out of that freezing cold water, but as soon as you get out of the water and get on the beach, you're shot, you're zeroed in.
So you said a little bit earlier that your decision whether you wanted to stay in the Navy was pretty much made for you when they seemed to be jerking you around all the time. So
that was the worst thing of all.
Yeah.
After coming home by Christmas, you spend Christmas at home. You got a 30-day leave. I came from Canada. I could visit people and friends in Canada and so on. I was back in Canada when I got a draft notice there, and the buddy that was hanging around with, that he says, we'll go together. When he went for his inspection and medical, he smoked so goddamn much that he had pleurisy. He was 4F. But I met Canadians that were in the Army and had already gone overseas. When I get back home, I've been over and back, and I meet these guys over there. One guy had wounded, he got shot in the leg and so on. And we're like buddies. How come you got to go there and so on?
So
In fact, one time when we were in this little harbor, I used to watch the motor torpedo boats. I'm thinking that they're flying the British flag.
Mm-hmm.
I'm standing in line. I'm going to go to the movies with somebody else. Waiting to go in the meeting. A bunch of guys are coming down the other side. To me, they're all limeys, but they were Canadians. I had a nickname, Pepper. Nobody on this side or anybody knew me as Pepper, so on. But in Canada, that was my my nickname. Everybody called me Pepper. And all it was, this guy said, "Hey, Pepper!" This guy comes running over to me and says, "Holy Christ!" It was a guy named George Miles. We used to call him Smokey. Smokey Miles comes running up and says, "Holy shit," he says, "I'm glad to see you." I says, "How did you recognize me?" He said, "I recognize you anywhere." He says, come on, I'll show you the boat." He's taking me down where these boats were coming in and sinking. Motor torpedo boats, I was thinking they're British, but they were all Canadians that were doing it. The British have a way of taking credit for things and letting somebody else do it. Canadians and Aussies and New Zealanders, they were doing more goddamn fighting than you could imagine. They were the first ones that invaded Normandy, were Canadians. The British took credit for it. Half of them got captured, and our newspapers in Toronto at the time of that invasion came up. They had 2 pages of captured and dead from that invasion. That was the first test, is really what it was.
All right, so May 1946 comes around and it's time to get out of the military. Was it this your end of your 2-year contract? What led to you leaving the Navy?
Because of the incompetence of our Navy, of the guy not putting in the records, and I can't go. I'm ready to go. I've already been in combat. I'm ready to go with this whole crew that I've grown up with. Most of those crew guys had already been 3 invasions of North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, and they were all veterans themselves. And I served with those guys on that thing. I'm a part of that whole family, right. And they tell me that I can't go. The whole shipload, even the officers in there, are trying to get me to stay, but no. Just because it was an officer didn't say put it in there. I had to stay here and go through boat school. And you know, when you want to win a war, you don't give a shit. You want to serve and you want to do your thing. Yep. And I'm saying, here, I want to go and I can land on them islands over there in the Pacific. I know how to run a boat, but I can't go. I got to go and be patsied around.
And where were you when you discharged? What base were you at, or what station?
I was right up here in, I think Brooklyn Navy Yard. Okay. I think out of that Brooklyn Navy Yard.
And Mom and Dad are living in Bridgeport still?
No. My father and my sister had left Canada. My sister was a daddy's girl, and she's the one when Pearl Harbor got hit, 1941, wasn't it? 1940. Yeah. It was 1942, almost 43, when she convinces her father, "You should go back to the United States. You're needed there, you're needed there." He wasn't needed there any more than he was in Canada, because he's working in de Havilland aircraft factory, building planes.
Okay. All right. So when you got out, you came back. Where did you go when you got out?
Well, by that time, they were here.
They were here.
My mother was going to get left there before I left, and I got my draft notice. I'm not going to leave my mother there, because the way it was, my mother's stubborn, my father's stubborn. My father would end up, in fact, he did have another goddamn girlfriend, because when I brought her down here, and he got dumped with her. I says, I'm not going to go and get killed and have my mother left in Canada and never come back for her.
Right. All right, so you're back home in Connecticut. What did you do, the weeks, months right after you got out of the service?
Look for a job.
And what did you end up doing?
You couldn't find a job.
Really? Okay. Because
Bridgeport itself was a manufacturing city, and the war's over. You're not making these, like Bridgeport Brass made the shells for the...
Yeah, all the manufacturing for the war effort was over.
For the war effort and so on. Yeah. So there was a stalemate. There wasn't any jobs around. I worked for some guy from Maine who was a welder. He was a friend of my father's and that, and he had a little 3-car garage, and he came down from Maine. And in that little 3-car garage, he called it Atlas Steel Company. And he goes to a place like Remington. He goes into Remington, talks to the people in Remington, and tells them, he says, what he was. He says, I can increase production for you. Just let me take a walk around your place. And he says, and I'll come back. And he says, there'll be no charge for it, just to help you do things. So he did that stuff, and he'd go around,
Okay.
and we'd propose to the big shots there. They'd tell them, if you do this, and if you do that, and you do this, and so on, and all these different things. And they would either accept it or whatever it was. And he did the same thing. What I was doing when I came back, I ended up working for this guy that taught me how to do welding. And I talked for an electrician for a while, but he says, in order to keep on hiring me, he has to hire the electrical field, is you have to go through apprenticeship and so on. And he was doing this on the side and so on. He says, you're going to have to go through the apprenticeship to be with me, which means he wouldn't be working for him. And they said, I don't want to work for anybody. I know enough of, my father was a refrigeration man.
Okay.
And I learned a lot about electricity from my father, because I was the one who used to crawl underneath the buildings and drill the holes in the things and pull a BX cable through. So anyway, I ended up, somebody told me about the sign business, and there was somebody that was looking for some help, and maybe I could get a job with him. His name was Tom Kane. Previous to that, he was a sign service man. We made signs, but he didn't have the proper equipment for making signs and boxes and so on. But he had a whole lot of used signs. He had a piece of property up in Monroe, about 5 acres of land, an orchard and something, but he had all these leftover signs that were already made for a certain beer company, and all it was a panel up in the top. You could name Joe's whatever, but it had the regular name on the front of it. And I got a job working for him. Not proud of that job. I started at $35 a week. I worked for him for 3 years, and I was up to $50 a week. And because of me, and because of what he would have to do, doing it himself, he had a son that was about 14 years old. He had his wife who did the balance of the books. So he had 2 sets of books. So you don't have to do this. He wants to pay me in cash. And I said, I don't want to get paid in cash. I wanted to go through Social Security. And that kind of teed him off, because that meant he had to report to the government what he was doing.
Right.
Anyways, all kinds of corn artists. Anyway, I worked for him, and after 3 years, and I'm asking for a raise from $50. And because of me, he was making over $1,000 a week. Because when I would go out to service signs, I could go up the ladders and get this thing and do this and fix the transformers. I knew how to get inside and fix the inside and all that stuff. And sometimes I would go there, instead of just taking one unit that was burned out, the customer doesn't know, I would take a couple of units out, and he would only have to repair one, which was maybe about $12. I think you can't just go out and keep on just do it honestly. You got to make some money on it. And I'm making money for him is what it was. Yeah. And because I'm making money for him, and he's really making money, because I worked even in the snow. Summertime when it's 95 degrees and I would still be doing all these jobs. And he was really making out good, but when he got to the point he wouldn't give me a $5 a week raise, then he says, why don't you quit? I says, I would quit, but I'm living on that $50 a week. I can't afford to quit to go looking for a job. I says, if you ever laid me off, I'd never come back because guaranteed I'd find a job.
Right.
And he got to the point where he hired somebody else under the GI Bill of Rights, paid this guy $25 a week. He's going to teach the guy how to paint signs. And I says, you got a lot of nerve. I says, you can't paint a sign. You don't know how to paint signs. We got a high school kid that would come and do the lettering on the sign. I would prepare the sign for him and get somebody in another place did the sketching. Then I would pounce the sketch, put it on there, and lay it all out. And all he had to do was, it's already primed, and then all he had to, high school kid would pay. You paid the guy $1.25 an hour to letter the signs. So we hired this guy under the GI Bill for $25 a week, and he's going to teach him how to paint a sign. And I says, he can't. How the hell are you going to teach him how to paint a sign? You don't need him. His real reason was he's going to send somebody out to help me. That's a mistake too. You go out. I got a couple of different jobs to do. I go out. We got to hang a sign up, bar and chain and everything else. And there's no thing. The roof is too low, so you got to turn around and get up on the roof, and you got to drill holes in the roof, and you got to get anchored in there and do all this stuff, tar it up and all that stuff. I know how to do these things, and here you got somebody coming along with you. Yeah. He's going to learn. He was a tugboat captain making $800 a week, and his wife wants him to have a steady job.
So after those 3 years, where did you go? You left the sign company?
After 3 years, he sent the two of us one time on a Friday. There's a lot of work to be done in the shop, but he says, we're not doing any work in the shop. He says, I want you to go up to Monroe, where his farmhouse is. I want you to put a deck on the back of my mother-in-law's house. Put a deck on there. Tommy will tell you what to do. Tommy's a 15-year-old son. Tommy will tell you what to do. Okay, so we get in the truck and we go up there. We leave at 7 o'clock in the morning. At 7:30, we're up in Monroe. Then we're looking in the backyard where the house is. His mother-in-law's in. He owned 3 places up there. And we're looking. There's planks here and there's planks there. And I said, well, we'll put a post here. We'll put a post there, and we'll do this. And we're discussing the whole thing before it's there. And here comes Tommy walking down the road from the house up the street, eating his thing, shoes untied. And Tommy comes down and he says, my father wants to do, Tommy, do me a favor. Go on home. I don't want any kid telling me what to do. This is a man's job. I know what to do. Go on back home. Well, he went back home and told his father. Well, that's to be understood. Anyway, we go to work and work on the deck. We get over half of it done, and it's quitting time. We'll come back tomorrow and we'll finish this thing. So when we go back to the shop and we pull in, and Tom Kane's the kind of a guy, very nonchalant. How'd you make out? We didn't finish. We're going to go back tomorrow. And I'll tell you something. From now on, don't send some goddamn kid down there to tell us what to do. You know I know what to do. Don't have some kid coming down to tell me what. Well, he already knows that is what it was. So for spite, next day we pick our checkups and we leave. Next morning, my mother gets a phone call. I'm laid off for a week. My mother says, you're laid off for a week. What are you going to do? I says, oh boy, am I glad of that. He says, why? I says, I told him a long time ago, if he ever lays me off, I'll never come back. And I'm not going back. The other guy, he calls me up a little bit later, and he says, he just called me. This is a Monday morning when he called me Saturday. This is a Monday morning when the guy called me. He called me up and laid me off. I says, I've already been laid off Saturday. He says, what are you going to do? I says, well, he already knew what I had said if he ever laid me off. I says, I told you, if he ever lays me off, I'll never come back. And I says, I'm just going down to register unemployment. I'm going down there to register, and then when I'm registered, I'm going looking for a job. I says, I'm never going back. That's all there was to it. So because I was going looking for a job, I don't go and working. I don't go. I change clothes, and I'm dressed up to look for a job. There was an ad in the paper, the cemetery on Connecticut Avenue. So I go over to the cemetery. It's a Wednesday is what it was. Oh no, it was a Wednesday I was supposed to start. It was a Monday morning, and I'm dressed up, and I went over and talked to the guy at the cemetery. I said, "You looking for help?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to work in the cemetery?" I says, "I don't give a damn." I says, "What's to do in the cemetery? Is it cut grass? That's about all you do in the cemetery. Cut grass and maintain things and keeping things neat and so on." He said, "Yeah, that's all there is to it." So he told me what the wages were and everything else. I said, "Okay. When do you want me to start?" He said, "Well, I don't need you right now." He said, "Can you start Wednesday?" I said, "Yeah, that's okay. I'll see you Wednesday." Okay. Right across the street's the brother of the guy that I'm working for. The guy I'm working for is in Bridgeport. This guy's over in Stratford. It's a Walter Cannon company. I work part-time for them, and they know I know the sign business. They used to hire me at different times, and I would work. My guys would only work 4 days. I mean, 5 days a week. No Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing time and a half or anything. This place would pay a time and a half for overtime and all of these things. And he paid me more money. He says, "Oh, you're going to work at a cemetery?" He said, "No, you're not going to work at a cemetery. You're a sign man." He said, "You don't want to work in a goddamn cemetery. Come on. You work for me. I'll pay you $75 a week. Just right off the bat. I'll pay you $75 a week." Well, yeah. Okay. So I let the guy know over there I wouldn't be back. I went for that guy. And my wife saying, I worked there, I think the first 2 weeks I was come home with $75. We did a job, we got a tip and so on. I come home with $80 one week. She says, "Oh boy," she says, "you're doing real good." "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I'm doing real good, but I'm not going to stay." "You're not going to stay on that job?" I said, "No, I'm going to move on." My friend from Maine, who had ended up, told me one time, he said, "You ever want to get a job at Allison Company, where we made abrasive wheels? Nothing to do with anything else that I had ever done," or so on. He says, "Anytime you want to get a job in there," he says, they pay pretty good. They're working 9.5 hours a day. They pay time and a half over 8 hours. The only thing is," he says, "you have to work nights at the start." He said, "But that pays 10% more." So I calculated that, Jesus Christ, I'm going to make over $100 a week. And I told him, I said, "Oh, put me in, get me in there, so I'll get back to you." Anyway, when I'm working for Walter Cannon doing these things, and my wife's saying I would stay with him and all that stuff, and I can't because he's too erratic. He would turn around and he had some guy working there, he would be real nice and sweet, and the guy make one little mistake and he would scream his head off at him and so on. I says, "I'm not going to work." If he ever got mad at me over some little simple mistake,
Right.
I wouldn't take that crap. So that's how that's about as far as I can go, I think.
Okay. Did you have any close friends that you kept in contact with after your military service?
Let's see. Yeah, one guy from Pennsylvania. I used to write him every so often,
Okay.
but he was my bow hookman on the small boat. We got along good. He worked for Heinz Heinz ketchup.
Okay. Did you ever attend any of the veterans reunions or ship reunions or anything like that?
No,
No?
never had any of
Okay.
that. No.
Alrighty. How do you think your overall military experience affected your whole life? What kind of effect did it have on your life?
Oh, yeah. Comradeship, or getting along with others, is what the thing of it is. There's always somebody that you like or you don't like, but it's a matter of being a team. Teamwork is how it works.
Is there anything about your military service or your life in general that we haven't talked about today that you think is important to put down?
No, not really, no. Not really. It's, my thing is stand up for your rights. When it comes to being employed, and when somebody tries to tell you to do something other than what you're supposed to do, you just stand up for it. No, I won't do that. It's like cheating. It's like the guy across the street from me, worked for the water company. Used to drive a truck around. Once in a while I would see him painting a hydrant or something like that. He did drive a truck quite often. And I would be over here sometimes. I look at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He would come around the corner with his truck. The garage door would go up, and he would go and put the door down. And around 4:45, the door would go up, and he'd get in the truck. He goes back to punch out. The guy that's across the street. Doesn't have any kids. His wife worked all the time. He got 2 paychecks coming in, and he still has to cheat. I call him a thief.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we worked in Allison Company and got to the point because they had so many different managements. It was like a lucrative business that other companies want to bring you into. So the first thing you know, the original ones, it was taken over by American Chain and Company, because we made the cutoff wheels that fit on the machines that were made by American Chain. American Chain had the hammer and took us over. When they took over the management chain, the management we had in there was Huey Allison, who inherited from his uncle, who didn't know anything about the business or anything about it. It was just a matter of he stuck with this thing. It was his uncle that left it to him, and he has a manager running the place. This manager that run the place, he ran it real good. We had Christmas parties. It was a good place to work. Everybody, most of the people, it started off down in the Bronx, and it got moved up to this place up here, and most of the employees came with it. Most of them were Italian, and Italians have a way of thinking, don't show him anything because he'll steal your job. Well, when I got the job in the place that started off, I'm only there for 2 weeks. I'm learning the very first job, which is you have calendar rolls that are rolling around, and you take a piece of rubber and you break that rubber down, and you got like bread pans that are full of all the different grains and the different chemicals that go in it, and you soften that rubber up, and you take this thing and you mix it little by hand. It's dirty, it's gritty, and there's no guards. Calendar rolls, about that big around. A lot of fingers.
Yeah, I can imagine.
In fact, one time I was doing a different job on the night shift. It was a Friday night Friday night, Saturday, the guy's going to get married. And about halfway through the night, all at once is screaming. He's lost half of his hand in that thing. And the screams, oh, God.
Huh.
This guy with his hand. But there was a lot of risky things in that thing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like the big calendar rolls where you took, they had smaller ones, maybe about 6 feet, about this big around, and about 6 feet wide, smaller ones. That's what they had at first, a couple of them. But then they ended up buying these, they were at least 10 foot long and real big rolls on them. And that thing rolled fast. And you would have to break down the crude rubber and mix it with other things. Breaking down the crude rubber, you just got a razor blade, and there's a bar up there to stop it, and you got to cut 20 pounds of this crude rubber.
Mm-hmm.
That's the start of it. That was the main thing. Get the crude in, get that all melted down, and cut this thing and roll it. And after a while you get good at it. You can guess it. You'll be within a pound no matter what you did. Then when the guy hand gets caught in that thing, and he's up like this, trying to get that thing shut off. It's very scary. But that's jobs that. Where's OSHA? OSHA wasn't even.
I was going to say, didn't
OSHA
exist.
wasn't even around, but when OSHA came in and they would come and see these different things, you got to put a guard on this. You can't put a guard on those rolls.
Right.
In fact, right now, that place is down in Kentucky. The whole company, it got to the point because this one owned it and that one owned it and so on. And we end up, I had been a foreman in the place. I was a foreman for 3 years. And I finally was being a foreman. I told my wife my son was heading for Vietnam, and we drove him all the way out to the West Coast, and we stayed with him for a week while he was doing some finishing training, and waved him goodbye when he went off to Vietnam. And on the way back, as I said, my wife, when I get back, I told her, I'm going to quit. You're going to quit? What are you going to quit for? I said, I'm going to quit being a foreman. Oh, because she was a secretary and she used to come home complaining about, she was a legal secretary, worked for lawyers. They're the worst people to work for. Lawyers and doctors.
Yeah.
They're the cheapest ones of all. And she would come home complaining about this and that. I said, I'll tell you what, you don't have to work for those people. She was a real good shorthand. She was a secretary. That was her main thing in high school, was to take shorthand and take it down. And she could take both of us, she could do it and
Right.
she would have it and then type it out. They would come along with and tell her to use a dictaphone and do that. She says, no, I went to school for this. I'm not going to dictate from something. If you want me to do something, you tell me and I'll do it. So that was the same thing that I told her. If you don't like the job, you just quit. She quit a couple of jobs because she didn't like it. One lawyer she worked for turns around and takes her office chair, pulls it aside like that, stands on the chair to get something down off of a shelf. She says, I don't like what you're doing. Why not? You're standing on the chair. My wife went to work, dressed like she's going to a fucking party or something.
Yeah.
She went dressed to the hilt every day. It was like she was like a showpiece. I'm not. You take that chair and you go wipe it off and everything else. The guy's giving her a hard time about it. She said, you know what? Keep this job and walk off the job. That's what she told me. She said, you told me if you don't like the job, just quit. I said, okay, she says. If you're going to go back and you're going to quit. So I did the same thing when I come back, but we had different different companies buying our company,
Right.
and we just went into this place. What was he was a commander in the Navy. He'd be out there talking around. He says, "You got to go by the rules. It's like a ship. I run a tight ship." I said, "Well, you're not going to run a tight ship in here. You got a bunch of union guys in here that don't give a shit what you say or what it is. They're going to tell you to go to hell or whatever it is. We're going to do this, we're going to do that." I said, "No, you don't do that. They'll revolt against you. You got people that don't give a damn what you think." That's it. Anyway, I was everything actually in that shop. I worked on both sides of it.
Okay.
And it got to the point when I became union president. From a foreman to a union president, that's two opposites.
It is.
And you got people in there that think differently. Jesus Christ, you're a company man, and now you're trying to tell us what to do as far as the union goes. We ended up somebody that came along one time, and he bought the factory, he bought the property, he bought the whole place out. And he said he was only there for one day, and he gets a whole bunch. "I want to talk to you people," and he lets us know. He says, I want you all to get together. I'll give you till tomorrow, and I want an ultimatum. We got to make some concessions. In other words, you're going to start to fucking work is really what we got goof-offs. We got everything else. People are slowing down. We got to make some concessions. I'm head union man at that time. We hold a meeting at the VFW over here in the hall. I got this guy here and got this. I've talked to different ones, and my supporting team, I tell them my point of view is so on. This guy means business. We got to make concessions. Well, there's so many people that are just, they don't give a damn about the job. Let it go. They don't care. I said, but you got to think about the ones, the valley workers that here. Here in Bridgeport, you make a certain amount of money. Say roughly $9 an hour way back then. But up in the valley up there, $6. It's a $3 difference right off the bat. And we got a lot of those employees in here. They're making the $9 thing. To me, it's a godsend for this factory to be where it is. And to have these guys have to quit and go back to these $6 an hour jobs. Like, what is it? The nail company that was up there in Derby. It's not big nail. What it was a nail company. I'm talking to that one from the sign company one time. He needs a sign on the front lawn of his place up there, and I get called up there. He thinks I'm the big shot of the whole place. I'm a worker in the place, really. But they sent me up to talk to him. He wants a sign. Where would you put the sign? I said, you got a nice building here. It's good. Nice big front lawn. I said, put a sign right here in the front lawn. The traffic, that sign's going to stand up like a sore thumb. Channel letter signs and so on. What size would you? I tell them exactly how I would put it and so on. Oh, okay. He said, oh, yeah, that sounds good to me. He says, while you're here, I'll think about it, and he says, I'll give you a call in a couple of days. I'm only a worker there, but he thinks I'm the owner. He's saying to me, he says, I want you to take some of these nail clippers home. He said, you got what, 6 or 7 employees? I said, about 30. 30 employees in your place? Yeah, we got 30 employees. We service signs all over the state of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and everything else. We got boom trucks. We got 100-foot booms. We put them on buildings. You do? Yeah. Wow. Can't believe that. What do you do there? Just like, right now I'm a foreman. I used to be, but I drove on the boom trucks. They put me up in the buckets. I'm a sign man. Okay. Anyway, that job was accepted, and that job got done, and so on. But that's what I'm talking about, the wages, about making money and so on. That's when I found out. I says, Derby, all those little towns up there, $5 and $6 an hour is what they're getting paid. Oh, no, not our thing.
Well, sir, it was very good to meet you. It was my honor to meet you, and thank you so much for telling your story. It'll go into the archives with our museum, and it'll be available to anybody to see. It'll go up on our website, and
Okay, you don't have to put all that shit in there. You
No.
gotta put it in the Navy stuff, right?
I'm gonna. We're gonna put it all in there. Your whole life.
Utah Beach.
Your